Hello everyone, and welcome to the third and final webinar in our WGU and Nurses on Boards Coalition Summer Series. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Molly Nordgren, and I'm the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Nursing for the College of Health Professions at WGU. For those of you who have joined us on our previous webinars, welcome back. We're excited to have you all here today as we discuss how to avoid board service burnout, the advantage of long-term board service. Joining me today is Laurie Benson, who is the Executive Director at the Nurses on Boards Coalition, also known as NOBC. WGU is proud to be a founding sponsor of NOBC, which works to build healthier communities through the service of nurses on corporate, health-related, and other types of boards. After we learn more about NOBC and about Laurie's experience as a nurse leader, we also want to hear from Sharon Sweeney-Fee, who has served on a board for more than 10 years. Sharon will talk with us about her history of board service, what she has learned about leadership during her service, and how serving on boards for an extended period of time has helped her to grow in her professional network. What makes our discussion with Sharon extra special today is that she is also a course instructor here at WGU. Lastly, we will open up a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar for you to ask us questions. Throughout today's discussion, if you have questions, I invite you to type them into the chat box located in the bottom right corner of your screen. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar. Let's go ahead and get started.
Well, I am so excited to have a conversation today with Laurie from NOBC. And before we get started, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with NOBC and you know, your relationship with the organization?
Certainly. Well, Molly, thank you for inviting me to join you, and I'm so pleased to participate in this third in our series of webinars. One of the things that I would share about how I got involved is I was always very interested, being a nurse myself, in leadership, and governance is an extension of leadership. So I took it upon myself early on to really become a student of governance. And while I began my career as a nurse, I've had many different leadership roles, including in business and in nursing. And I've had the opportunity to serve on over a dozen boards over the last 30 plus years. And one of the things that really has struck me is I believe the reason I can be an effective board member is that I approach organizations in a board role through the lens of a nurse. And I've come to appreciate that the way nurses assess the environment, the way we apply critical thinking skills, the way that we consider the implications of decisions and certainly are always mindful of the mission and why we are there, really lends itself beautifully to all nurses. So from my own personal experience, when I learned about the Institute of Medicine at the time's report about the future of nursing, I was eager to be involved in some way. And at that time, I was chairing my alumni School of Nursing board, and we got to hear Donna Shalala, who was the then Health and Social Services Secretary, present that report. And I remember going right to our dean's office afterwards and saying, what can we do? Shouldn't we start by having students serve on our board? And that's exactly what we did because she embraced the idea. So later I was contacted by the CEO of a hospital who told me about the Nurses on Boards Coalition and thought maybe I would be a good fit. And I must say, after interviewing and really learning and focusing on this mission to improve health for all in communities across the nation, if I wasn't selected, I would be volunteering in some way because this is such a powerful mission. And I wasn't looking for something to do. But like many of you, you know, it's important we bump out our boundaries and recognize and act on opportunities. So that's how I got here, Molly, and it is an absolute privilege to serve alongside our colleagues, and we're thrilled to have such a wonderful, absolute privilege to serve alongside our colleagues, and we're thrilled to have such a wonderful partnership with Western Governors University.
I love that, Lori. I love what you said about bumping out your boundaries and how you weren't necessarily looking for something. I think, we live our lives to the brim as nurses, and we often don't feel like we have time to serve. And I actually really appreciated that about Carrie in the previous webinar's comments about how she was able to juggle family and board service and working and being a student. I think that it can be done if you're willing to, make it a priority. Do you have any thoughts or insights about how 12 boards, that's a huge number of boards in service for quite some time. How have you organized it so you've been able to maintain a work-life balance, but also serve in areas where you were passionate?
Well, that's an interesting question because I actually don't use the term work-life balance because I feel like I will always have to preface it with out of balance. So one of the things that I have shifted in order to address exactly what you're talking about, that is so real for all of us. What should I commit to that I can really for certain know I'm going to have the time and the space to represent the organization and others, responsibly and accountably. So I started thinking about what are my priorities versus where is my balance. And that was really empowering insight for me, and it was suggested to me by someone else because then you think about it's not equal. So it's not do you equally spend your time in all these areas at home and at work, but it is more what are the priorities and are you spending the right amount of time at the right time for each of those? So that was very freeing for me. And I think one of the most important ways to address this, do you have the time? And you're right, I thought Carrie did a great job of addressing that. That is important to ask that question. Well, you can't say yes to everything. So by saying no to certain things, by finding someone that can succeed you in a certain role, maybe mentoring someone else, that can also elevate others. But I try to make sure that I'm not taking on more without saying what could I do differently, more efficiently, or have someone else step up and take some roles. And those are really important conversations that we have every day. So I hope that's just a glimpse of, for me, what I hear from other nurse leaders, which is probably very interesting to your listeners, is that initially you might say, oh, I want to do that, but not now. And so today's challenge, the world can't wait. So if we don't do this, who will? So it's more, is it convenient right now, but how can I find a place to make it work? And then, of course, to make sure you understand the commitments both inside and outside the boardroom. But there is a sense of urgency here where rather than waiting till it's convenient, that it's important for all of us to say, what can I do now?
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me to reframe my thoughts on that. I agree. I think there's room for everything in our lives that we're passionate about and that we feel committed to. And I agree. We do have such an urgency to be heard as nurses. And you also mentioned in your comments about, the fact that we've talked a lot about getting a board appointment, and we've spent the two previous webinars talking about how that works and how NOBC can help with that. But I guess my question would be for us to wrap up this series, if you could help us understand what happens after you say yes, after you've actually committed to that service.
Well, thank you for that thoughtful question, because sometimes we do take a leap, and with these diverse board opportunities, commissions, appointments, it is not likely that you're going to know everything you need to know prior to attending that first board meeting. That's a reality, which is very different because we as nursing professionals always want to have all the information we have, whether it's about a patient, whether it's about a family, whether it's about a population. And now we're in this board setting. So one of the things we did to demystify that is actually record a mock board meeting that you can watch at your leisure, and that's posted on our website, courtesy of our colleagues in Ohio. We learned that from our state contacts that they had done this, and so we asked if they would actually record it, so we're delighted that they did, to really talk through the basics of what happens at a board meeting. So in today's discussion, Molly, I won't go into all the what are the basic responsibilities of a board member, the loyalty of service, the duty of service, and all of those kinds of things. There's all kinds of resources on our website that talk about those in trainings. But I would say at a high level, once you say yes, here's a couple of practical steps that probably aren't in an article, but I've learned from experience. So for each new board I have joined, I remind myself, first and foremost, I am now a member of a collective leadership group. It is one of my favorite things to do to serve on a board because it is a collective thinking environment that I don't have to have all the answers. We're going to ask questions. I'm going to make sure that if I have questions about opportunities or risk management, they get addressed. But at the same time, this is a collective decision-making body. So I find just rich power that comes from the enlightened thinking of a group of leaders together. So I say, do I know those leaders? When you think about it, we all work in teams. That's nursing professionals. We're accustomed to that. So now this board is going to be a team that we're working with. So I seek out each board member individually and ask them if we can have a 30-minute call or if they would be willing to come to the board meeting 30 minutes early or to stay after, just to get to know them. And why is that important? Because trust is the foundation of all decisions. And when I know how others on the board think or what their philosophies are or what their lens is, I won't waste that time in the meeting trying to figure out, well, where did that come from? I will, just like we do with patients, that we spend the time to get to know them and what matters most to them. So you might say, well, there's a bunch of time right away, but it's time well spent. And you don't have to do it all in your first month, but at least reach out and at the meeting say, you know, over the next 3 months, I'd love to talk with you. It also shows respect to the others. So the other thing in serving on a new board, you want to make sure you know the organization's leadership. So I meet with the CEO or the executive director and just get a make sure I understand the strategies. And then over time, offer, you know, if they have company meetings or organization meetings, you know, ask how else you can help. One of my favorite things to offer with my whole heart is how can I help? So while there be specific expectations of you, reach out to the executive director. You've all been leaders of organizations, and some of you are now, saying, when somebody asks you genuinely, how can you help? No one will give you a huge project. They might say, well, I'm wrestling with this decision. Can we take a few minutes? So always extend an unsolicited offer of how else can you help. In preparing for the board meeting, first of all, if they don't have an orientation, I would request one. And also, then before the first meeting, going through the agenda, write down strategic questions that you have relating to each of the topics. I'm a firm believer you can contribute from meeting one. And this is a great way to prepare and do so. If you have some things that you need to know in order to weigh in on a topic, then feel free to reach out to the board chair or the executive director or the CEO of the leadership and say, these would be a couple of things that would be helpful to me. And I would say in your first meeting, a lot of listening, but don't withhold your thoughts and comments. It's important in those meetings. You may have 6 points, but I would only make a few of those, and board members will ask questions if they need further information. So the importance of being very succinct and very clear in both the statements you make and the questions that you ask. And the third thing I would say is be open. Don't arrive with where you're going to decide or weigh in on a particular topic. Listen to your colleagues and be willing to shift your thinking based on what you hear during the meeting. So just come prepared to, relax. You're prepared. Now your job is to listen and engage in a way that advances the mission and the good of the whole. And as nurse leaders, I know we're all accustomed to those types of settings. And so this leadership extended into the boardroom in the form of governance isn't much different than what you do every day. And ask questions when you have them.
That's great, Lori. I think our audience will appreciate hearing that it's not that much different than what we do every day. I think this can feel a little bit foreign and a little bit scary, and I think you offer some really great suggestions for kind of helping with that anxiety, helping with the preparation, and also just kind of normalizing it a little bit so it doesn't seem so, something that's unachievable for anyone who really wants to serve. We've had in the first two in the series, we had an opportunity to hear from Amy and Carrie, who had awesome examples of board service and board leadership and how they were able to kind of meld that into their work and their passion and really make a difference in the areas in their community that they felt strongly and passionately about. In our last interview with Sharon, it's a little bit different. She is actually a leader on a board. She has several different boards that she has served on. She's done board service in areas not related to healthcare that she was just passionate about. But she also has a really interesting perspective on regulatory boards. She's on the Board of Nursing in her state. And she also has longevity. She's been on the board for many years, and she'll talk about that experience and what she's learned from being on a board for a long time. What thoughts do you have on the differences between regulatory nursing boards and other types of boards?
The foundational principles are very much the same. It's how and in what setting they're applied. So in this case, what we're seeing is an increasing number of nurses registering in our database that have this public policy and advocacy, both experience, education, and training, that we're seeing a real significant increase in those who have the background and experience to contribute in those ways. So we've partnered with several organizations in order to bring more of those opportunities forward. But in terms of the regulatory environment, there's risk management that's built in at a different level. There are some compliance elements that are different. But in terms of the opportunities, I can't think of a commission, an appointment, a regulatory role that does not have the opportunity for enlightened thinking as part of it as well. So it's absolutely imperative that someone has that experience and knowledge to operate in that environment, but I find it really exciting how this is so quickly evolving, and the increasing number of nurse leaders serving in these roles. So we can all learn and grow and have that impact in new places.
That's amazing. I completely agree. And I think, too, we have affinity for different types of boards. And, there are those that are passionate about regulation and oversight and can really make a difference in those areas.
So, Molly, I was just going to mention I had a call yesterday from a nurse leader who was working with one of the federal commissions, and she's transitioning roles. And she spent about 20 minutes telling me about her passion with advocacy, and she can't wait to have one of those roles. And I think that's just a great example of the interest. And I also wanted to comment here when we're saying increasing registrations. Molly, I just want to thank you and your colleagues and your team. I think we should give a shout out that the students, the faculty, and the alumni of Western Governors University have over 1,100 of you have registered in our database to be counted. And overall, we're at 6,500 toward our goal of 10,000 nurses serving in all types of boards. So we just want to really thank all of you who are not just listening, you are actively engaging and making a difference, and it's phenomenal. So we just celebrate that and thank you.
Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. I would echo Western Governors University's appreciation for the NOBC and the work that you are doing to support the growth of our profession and the growth of individual nurses across the country. And we at Western Governors feel very strongly about the opportunity for our students, our faculty, as well as our alumni to be heard and to have a voice and to find those things that they're passionate about and to engage in their communities and in their profession. And as you said, to bump out your boundaries and to really stretch ourselves and to find ways to make a difference. And for that and that partnership, we're very grateful. So we appreciate your time being with us today, Lori, and we look forward to hearing more about it and answer in the Q&A section, and also hearing from Sharon. So thank you.
Thank you.
I recently had the pleasure to sit down with Sharon and learn more about her long-term experience serving as a nurse on boards for more than 10 years. Join me as we hear what Sharon has to share with us. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have this time to sit down with you and to learn more about your experience serving on a board. Our objective is really to discuss how we can help those who are already serving on a board to have the tools and information necessary to continue and improve their service, and really see how the longevity of board service can benefit the nursing profession. And I'd like to kind of start there a little bit. Can you tell us about the history of your board service, where you got started, what your first board looked like, your first board service looked like, and what you've done since then?
Oh, I'd be happy to, and thank you so much for asking me to be here, Molly. It's wonderful. I started very early in my nursing career being involved in boards because I cared about the topic. One of the first boards I was involved with was a stroke association in Arizona, where they were getting people together trying to put in stroke protocols when they first had some, and how do we teach our hospitals to use it. And this was through the Heart Association's Stroke Association arm. And I just love being a positive nurse, talking about, what can we do and how can we do it, and being involved with a really interdisciplinary group and really making a change around the care for our patients and how they got to the right hospital at the right time. So from there, it was really exciting. I got involved with the Nurses Association in Arizona. And from there, I got involved with the American Nurses Association's Ethics Advisory Board, which was a national board that had a 4-year commitment, and it was just a wonderful experience to be there. I was there as an informatics specialist because that is what my degree is in nursing, and they were really kind of looking for that kind of component in talking about the ethics of using these health information systems and how we're using the information out of it. And it was just going to these national meetings with a core group of ethicists and talking about ethics for 2 days was just like this luxury of really hearing these professional, intelligent nurses talking. And it was just a great place to find mentors, learn from others, and spend time. Those boards that have those 4 years commitments, and a lot of times there's one renewal and the time limit, it feels like a daunting commitment, but your first 4 years is really learning everyone and learning the process and learning what they do. And then the second 4 years is your opportunity to take leadership opportunities because you're one of the experienced members. And so I think it's a really good model that I've seen a lot of boards use. I am currently on the Board of Nursing, and that's an appointment by the governor in Montana. It is also 4-year terms, and there's 2 terms. I'm in my second term. So I spent my first 4 years learning and understanding, and now I'm in a leadership position in my second term. And it's just wonderful to be the representative at the National Council for Montana and being one of the leaders. It's really fun. And I think these are always fun activities. One of the other things I do that's my non-nursing that I really got involved with as a way to, just as a leisure activity I enjoyed, which is trout fishing here in Montana. And there is Montana Trout Unlimited, which is a conservation organization that protects the cold water for the species. And I've been involved with that executive committee for 9 years now. And I'm currently the first female chair of the 55 years of Montana TU's existence. So it's really exciting to have learned in my first few years and now having an opportunity to be a leader. So that's kind of the big message about longevity. You have time to learn, and then you have opportunities to lead.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I love that you mentioned that it took you several years to kind of get in and learn things. When you think about the second term, as you mentioned, what kinds of things have you learned in that second term or in that leadership term that you would like to share to maybe someone who's considering joining a board, to help them kind of get their feet wet and know what that process looks like?
Right. And the leadership components of most boards is being able to lead a meeting and to run a meeting and being able to manage that. And I've just watched really good leaders run meetings. And so I started on a lot of times a nice way to get that skill is to do a task force or be willing to chair a committee where it's a smaller group, and then you can kind of practice your leadership chops about running a meeting in a smaller group and practicing in that way. And then now I'm very comfortable leading meetings and then also representing at national meetings. The NCSBN has 2 meetings a year where the chair and the executive director have a day where we're working with other presidents and executive directors around the country at meetings talking about different issues in nursing. And so being on boards helps you kind of learn to listen and then learn to speak up when you need to. And that's a really good skill to translate at those national meetings.
You mentioned that you've had some really great mentors over your board service and in the years that you've served. What have those mentors taught you, and what do you teach others who are new to board service that you work with?
I think some of the best mentors I've had have told me, don't worry. You don't need to know everything at once. Just they've been really open. The leaders that when I've started on boards are like, whatever we can do to help you, and make you feel very relaxed at the beginning. And that translates in being comfortable with what happens, because you don't feel stressed at your first meeting that you feel to know things and you need to know something. If you have a leader that knows you're new and helps you kind of get through and helps you understand that there's not a lot of expectation at the beginning. The expectation is that you're there to learn and ask questions as you need to. And so having that kind of open communication early on has led me to really notice those leaders who are open like that, who really reach out to early members of a group, of a board, and really help them understand that it's okay to spend some time getting your feet under you, and that we're here to answer any questions, and being really open. And that to me is real attractive.
So you're a faculty member at Western Governors University. How has board service helped you in your profession?
I think the big thing you learn on a board, because most boards are going to be 8 to 10 people and you're discussing really important issues. So there's a couple of ways it applies to what I do is, I would say the first is active listening. You really have to listen to different board members in coming to collaboration and agreement. It takes a lot of activity. So when I'm working with students, I'm able to use that active listening skill and come to some collaboration and agreement with students when I'm working with them. And I think even with patients, before I was in the faculty role and I worked in a hospital, I really used those skills with patients and really trying to help myself understand what they need. And if there was a problem, I knew I had a voice to talk to my my leaders about, okay, here's an issue, and I'm comfortable talking to you about it because I've been to these meetings with people that are way more intimidating than any of my employers. And you create relationships with those people, and they can help you with strategies when you're struggling with an issue at your workplace. You've got a network to reach out to.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that network. How has your network grown through board service?
Well, I think there's members of the Ethics Advisory Board that I was with at ANA a number of years ago, and we still stay in touch with each other. We kind of know who's doing what. That was a really close board. With the Nurses Association and the Montana Board, I run into people at different nursing meetings, continuing education, the annual nursing meeting here in Montana. I get to run into colleagues, and there's a familiarity that I have, and it's really fun to see people and let them know what's going on. I think the other thing in some of those relationships is I really have had groups of people where we kind of get together and strategize what we can do to create a change. And I have great resources that I can reach out to when we're trying to do that. And it's really nice to know I have people I can call and get their feedback and get their input. Even though they may not still be on a board with me, I still know how to find them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I want to go a little bit deeper into your experience with the Montana Trout Unlimited, and your passion for conservation. Has your nursing helped your position on that board in any way?
I think in a couple of ways. The conservation mission of Montana Trout Unlimited is about clean, cold water. And as a nurse, I can talk about the importance of clean, cold water in a variety of ways. And so I have the ability to kind of bring different perspectives where we're not just talking about one resource, but we're talking about a lot of reasons why we need to protect the waters of Montana. So I can bring that. The other thing is the nursing informatics. I can really talk about, let's collect some data so that we have good data if we're going to make a decision, if we're going to approve legislation, if we're going to change a policy, what's the data? And so having that nursing knowledge when there's a scientific report that comes, I have the ability to understand it in a way because I've had to read scientific manuals as part of my nursing career. And so I can understand that. So I have a wealth of knowledge in the sciences that really translates when we're talking about looking at scientific reports. So I think nurses a lot of times don't give ourselves credit for the strong education that nursing has in the sciences, and that we really can be an active and supportive member in these groups that are science-based. And it really does bring a great skill that we can use and bring our science chops to it.
I love that. I think you're right. I think we often undersell our skills, and being able to apply them into various situations is really important. So tell me about something that you're really proud of that you've accomplished through your board work.
You know, at the Board of Nursing, one of the things I'm really proud of is we were one of the first states to change all of our advanced practice language to the consensus language that the National Council recommended. So we were a very early adopter of that language, and it was not an easy thing. Even though we have full practice in Montana, whenever you open those statutes up, you get a lot of interested people in. And getting through that and all of we have to review every comment because it's a statute change and a rule change. It really took some time, but really going through that process and being one of the leaders in adopting the consensus language was very exciting. One of the other really exciting, very long-term projects I was involved with on the Board of Nursing was changing our rules around delegation. The School Nurses Association came to us and the Diabetes Association came to us, and we had rules that were very unclear with relation to managing diabetic students in schools. And so the school lawyers were saying, well, there's two different rules here. So we were able to get a task force of the school nurses, the Diabetes Association, the Board of Nursing, and really look at, we also had nurses from jails looking at what are our delegation rules, how can we make them very clear so we know when a nurse needs to be involved and when not, and what delegation is and what it isn't. And that was a long process that took quite a few revisions, a couple of years, but now we have a solid rule that helps both those nurses in jails, those nurses in schools, to really making sure that a nurse is managing the patient, which is really important.
That's really phenomenal work. I bet that was really interesting for you. And, I think I appreciated the comment about how long it took. I think often a lot of the work that we do in these environments can take a considerable amount of time, but are so important to, to the betterment of our communities as a whole. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I can feel your passion and energy around all of the work that you've had an opportunity to participate in. And I'd just like to close and give you an opportunity to share anything else that you think someone who's either interested in a board or is new to board service and wants to serve for a long time. What advice would you have for those individuals?
I think anyone that's interested and not sure what they want to do, look at those task forces, look at those subcommittees that they're asking for community input, and be one of those community members. That's a really good way to learn about an organization, give some, be a participant on an organized attempt to change something. But you don't have to be on the board or a leader, but you can be a participant on those task forces. And that's a really good way to see how different boards work and really understand where is your passion, where is it that you want to work, because there's nonprofits in your community, there are boards of nursing, there's nursing associations, there's all sorts of opportunities out there. So just be willing to try something that you can fit in your schedule, and then be open to when they come and ask you, because many of these boards I've been on have been a result of somebody asking me. So just being open to when you're asked.
That's great. Sharon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Molly. I really enjoyed it.
Great.
Well, that was fantastic, listening to Sharon's experience and listening to her advice in terms of the importance of really getting on a board and learning as you go. I loved her comment about that we all have, the boards give us the time to learn and the opportunities to lead. So it was great to hear Sharon's example of really bringing our mission to action. I'm Laurie Benson, rejoining you. And for the Q&A portion, as Molly indicated early when she kicked off this third in our series webinar, that we invite you now, this is your time to ask us questions about what you've heard today or maybe in the previous webinars, so that we can help you move forward where you are toward raising your voice in new ways. So you can type in your questions. We invite you to do so in the chat box, and we'll make sure we answer each and every one. I'm excited to see we already have our first question that came in from Cindy today. She's asked, what would be an example of a board you could join with no prior experience? Well, Sharon just talked about that a little bit. And she said that she started with something she cared deeply about. And I think that's good advice for all of us. So when you think about the definition of a board that you can join, you may be new to the board, but not to the topic. So thinking about what you care about currently, what you're involved in, what you're interested in getting involved in, and maybe something that you already support at a volunteer level. So I can tell you that the most natural path for a first board experience is a nonprofit organization. Any of you involved with nonprofits know they're always looking for volunteers. And as Sharon just mentioned, sometimes getting involved in a committee first really demonstrates your interest and support for the organization that often evolves into a board opportunity. And on our website, we have a list of all different types of boards for you to think about, because we're inclusive and we want nurses to be able to join boards of all types to raise your voices. But I think with no prior experience, to pick a topic that's near and dear to your heart. Maybe if you have young children that you're involved at your school, is there a committee? Is there a board associated with that? So look at what you're doing in your life, what you support in your life, and think about types of boards where strategy and policy decisions are made that you could help shape. So I hope that answers your question, Cindy.
And we'll go to the next, which came in from Kathleen. She says, besides the healthcare realm, where can nurses bring change to boards that might be considered outside the box for nurses, but be a needed voice at the table? I love this question because I think we've all learned that it's incumbent upon all of us to play a key role in advancing change and providing not only in the healthcare arena, but improving health for all in communities across our nation. So outside the box, we don't really have a box anymore. There's room for breakthrough thinking. And I can tell you one of the fastest growing areas that's really exciting for nurses to get involved in is startups. So in your community and the people that you know, do you know anybody who started a business that has a great idea, a new product or a solution? I would ask them if they have an advisory board, and if they don't, if they've considered that. The nursing lens is such a great combination with entrepreneurial thinking, and you can play a role in helping consider the risks and the opportunities in moving those ideas forward. So that's just one example, but I would also say that the board leaders themselves are taking a close look at what is the modern boardroom like. And one of the conclusions that's been well documented is that boards perform better, and so do their organizations, when there's diverse thinking in the room. So many boards are challenged with, okay, we understand that, but how are we going to find other candidates? So by nurses looking at different companies that you're interested in and contacting them, you're making that connection for them to new people that might be considered the next time they have board opportunities. And this topic is one that we could have a webinar on by itself, because there's never been a better time. There's never been a greater abundance of opportunities, but they are definitely ours for the making. And so I encourage you to do a website search, to look at on the internet, put in a topic of your passion, and look at the organizations that come up in your community that are doing work in those areas, and reach out and contact them and ask if they've considered a nurse. So I hope those are good thought starters to at least bump out those boundaries, think of some new ways you might serve, and identify some opportunities. We have another comment here that Carrie tells us she was really excited and thankful during her health courses at WGU, community health courses, that she could attend meetings as a grad student. That's a great example. On her local Commission for Persons with Disabilities State Injury Prevention Coalition. So she not only got assessment hours, but she got connected to those board members. That's a really great example of how to get connected, like Sharon brought up, through other roles initially. So thank you for sharing that positive experience, Carrie. We have a question, is the webinar on YouTube? And at the end of this webinar today, we're going to be sending out the link. Our friends at GWU will be sending that out. So at WGU, Western Governors University is committed to providing these ongoing resources. And in addition to the webinars, they'll be sharing other information as well. Can you access the previous webinars? Yes, yes, yes. And so this is the third in the series. And it was wonderful because we had an exemplar from your students, your faculty, and your alums of really how they're applying these concepts we've discussed. So Amy, Karen, and Sharon all shared their stories. And so you may want to think back and look back at those and listen as you're actually pursuing opportunities. So you'll have access to all of them. I see a thank you, WGU, and we join in that sentiment. It's just a fantastic partnership we have. And frankly, that partnership is all about helping each of you prepare, pursue, and serve on boards in an area you care deeply about. I have a question here from Kara. How do I register my board service with the Nurses on Boards Coalition? Well, first of all, you heard me share earlier in our remarks that we have over 1,100 of you who have registered on our website. You can register. NOBC at Nurses on Boards Coalition is our email address. And our website is simply nursesonboardscoalition.org. I'd like to talk for a moment about this. You can register your board service, which we talked about. A key strategy is to have 10,000 board seats held by nurses by 2020. At the same time, you can also register your interest in serving on your first board. When you do so on our website, you can click on the "Are you interested in serving?" or I currently serve, and just follow the simple directions. It shouldn't take you more than 5 to 7 minutes to register. And what's really important is that you indicate you're interested in receiving our communications. Once a month, we send out a summary of new resources that you can access and things that are happening in board appointments. And we try to be very respectful and not send out multiple communications. So that's kind of everything in one. And then in addition to that, if you have a resume, please upload it when you register, because we identify boards across the country and opportunities, and then we do a search in the database and make sure that we share those with Molly and Kara and Samantha so that they can be talking to those of you who are interested, and sometimes we reach out to you directly. So when we had the question earlier about how can I get started on my first board, well, make sure you do register, and we want to have you a part of our ongoing community for support, resources, and opportunities. So the next question is from Erica. I move often and struggle with staying on a board long enough so I get involved, but I am not able to commit to 2 to 4 year position roles. Do you have any suggestions how to navigate my circumstances besides just being involved? Now that is a real world question. If you move often, I can tell you that you are not alone. And one of the things that is very important when you're looking at an organization to get involved in as a board member, I truly believe that if you should not hold back because you don't know how long you're going to be there. So if you are truly on the road so much and moving so often that you can't be there for a year, then other roles probably make sense. But for a board, if you're upfront and say, I don't know how long I'm going to be in this community, but while I'm here, I want to have the greatest impact that I can, that's absolutely fine. And you'd be surprised. You may be welcome to serve in those roles. So I would say don't discount the contributions you can make based on how long you have to be available. And this may become something you're very good at, is bringing enlightened thinking. And that it will be sustained. But when you move and when you leave, I suggest that you offer to recommend another nurse colleague to take that seat. So, well, without knowing your personal circumstances, and by the way, you can contact me and I'd be happy to talk to you about this more completely. But I think that there's no reason to limit the impact that you can have, and use good judgment about being transparent about it, and find a way that you can raise your leadership voice where you are right now. So I think that we're at the point where we're going to wrap up. Are there any final questions? Well, we have a note here that many local and state organizations have a national umbrella where they may have online and virtual meetings. And I would tell you that I would share that we have a relationship with United Way worldwide, and that they are encouraging United Ways all over the country to invite nurses to serve on their boards. One of their 3 pillars of their strategy is improving health. And so you could certainly contact a United Way agency, which is a great place to start, and let them know you're interested. Well, I know that we need to wrap up. We're hoping that every one of you has learned from our webinar series in a way that helps you think differently about the contributions you can make as a nurse leader. On behalf of the leadership at Western Governors University and the leadership at the Nurses on Boards Coalition, we celebrate each of you as students, faculty, and alum for all you do in the communities where you live and work. whether it's at the local, state, or national level, and please let us know how we can help. I invite you to send me additional questions at Lori at nursesonboardscoalition.org. We are so grateful to each of you. You inspire us. Let us know how we can help you. We can't wait to see what you do next.